actually very difficult to keep track of where we've got to in terms of the bills. And, of course, as we know, the Safety of Rwanda bill is going through the Lords at the moment. Because you may remember, and I had to remind myself of where we've got to, the illegal migration bill has gone through. There was a lot of pushing and shoving to go through, to get that through. It essentially says, if you come here on a small boat, you cannot claim asylum. If you do come here on a small boat, you will be detained for 28 days and removed. Any future asylum claim is then invalid and you have a lifetime ban. We'll open safe and legal routes into this country, and there will be no right of appeal or no judicial process. Now, that was overruled by the Supreme Court that said it's unethical, it's unlawful, and you can't do that, and the Safety of Rwanda bill is passing through the House at the moment. Now, the latest story, which broke yesterday, and it's in the House of Lords at the moment, is members of the House of Lords are beginning their detailed examination of the Safety of Rwanda bill in the committee stage, and that all starts on Monday of next week. The aim of this bill is to confirm that Rwanda is a safe third country for the removal of people entering the UK under new immigration laws and to deter migration by unsafe and illegal routes. This comes on the back of the Council of Europe wading into this argument. And this is Europe's leading anti-torture watchdog. It's called on the government to process asylum claims in the United Kingdom rather than sending people to Rwanda because of the risk that they may be exposed to human rights abuses there. They published a report on Thursday. The Council of Europe's Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhumane Degrading Treatment or Punishment raises a litany of concerns after they visited the UK, wait for this, in March and April of last year. So it took them that long to write this report. The report goes on to say that the UK's Illegal Migration Act, which allows asylum claims to be determined in Rwanda rather than in the UK, and the Migration and Economic Development Partnership with the UK and Rwanda raise multiple concerns over the treatment of vulnerable persons and warns they may be subject to torture or inhuman, degrading treatment if they are sent to Rwanda. So once again, we've got now the Council of Europe wading in, and of course the government is absolutely determined to get the Safety of Rwanda bill through because, of course, Rishi Sunak keeps saying he is going to stop the boats. Well, joining us now is Sam Fowles, human rights barrister. Very good to see you this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much indeed. Here we go again. This has gone on for a very long time, hasn't it? And I think people at home who wanted to stop the boats want this over and done with, and they want to see planes in the air. I know you don't agree. Where do you think it goes from here? Because it's a really convoluted process. The Safety of Rwanda bill now in the Lords undergoing scrutiny.
Well, I think the intervention from the Council of Europe is really important here. And let's remember, the Council of Europe was set up by Winston Churchill in the 1940s because he realised that we needed something to avoid another descent into authoritarianism and dictatorship. And the way to do that was by protecting fundamental rights. So Churchill called for this watchdog. He campaigned to have it set up. What it said now is exactly the same thing as the Supreme Court said back in November, which is, as a matter of fact, Rwanda is not a safe country. And in fact, that was the opinion of the British government as well, as recently as January 2021. When the British government said the Rwandan government is torturing and murdering opposition and it's not a safe place. But when Boris Johnson got into trouble and he needed a distraction, he came up with this Rwanda plan. He told the British government they had to change their minds, change the facts. And now the Parliament is trying to legislate to force the courts to change the facts and pretend that Rwanda is safe when every bit of evidence suggests that it's not.
Is there any kind of legal precedent? Because the Safety of Rwanda bill basically says Rwanda is a safe country, notwithstanding UK and international law, which means disapplying it. It also says we disapply the Human Rights Act, which is an interesting turn of phrase, the 1998 Human Rights Act, and basically says the UK government can ignore those pyjama injunctions when judges in the European Union or in Europe jump out of bed and say you can't send people to Rwanda. Has there ever been a precedent like this?
No. This is absolutely extraordinary because it's not just the Parliament saying the British government can just ignore international law willy-nilly. And I actually know, to be fair, David, there are some precedents because Russia did this and Hungary has done this. And so various tin pot dictatorships have said, oh, we're going to ignore international law. So it's quite problematic that the British government sort of see Russia as a good example to follow. But it's also unique because we've never had a situation where Parliament is saying to the courts, look, we understand you've scrutinised the evidence. We understand that you've looked very carefully at, for example, the refugees that were massacred in Rwanda a couple of years ago because they protested against the torturous conditions they were being held under. We understand that you've looked all of that and you've come to a decision of fact that Rwanda is not safe. We want you to just pretend that Rwanda's safe. Ignore the facts, change the facts, pretend that red is yellow, black is white, and just have and when a challenge to this bill comes forward, we want you to just conduct yourselves in a fantasy land. That's never been done before.
So in terms of why this is significant, the Council of Europe, and the reason it's significant is because these findings are relied on by the European Court of Human Rights. And so they are going to find against the British government. Now, in response, the British government says the UK government does not recognise much of the content of this report and feels it doesn't accurately reflect the important work we undertake to ensure the safety and well-being of those in our care. So someone's not telling the truth.
Yeah, and I think on this, it's probably the British government that's not telling the truth. And let's be very clear. The British government has a long record of not telling the truth on Rwanda. When MPs asked the government to tell them how much it was going to cost, the British government kept that secret because MPs asked the British government how it was going to work in practice. The British government kept that secret. It won't tell MPs, it won't submit itself to scrutiny on this. And in addition, we know the facts. You can see what is happening in Rwanda. We know that Rwanda is currently sponsoring a violent paramilitary group, M23, in Congo that's tearing through, raping and pillaging parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We know that Rwanda regularly imprisons opposition leaders. We know that Rwanda kills refugees murders refugees who protest against their conditions. We know that Rwanda is holding refugees in conditions where they don't have mattresses. They're not even allowed access to sanitary towels. All of this is fact. It's in the public domain, and the British government is just pretending it doesn't exist, asking us to pretend it doesn't exist because it's good politics. They haven't got any policies, and they need this distraction to be mean to migrants to make them look tough.
So you mentioned good politics. So what happens now? So the Council of Europe has come out with its findings. The ECHR will take on board what they say. Just from your experience, as it goes through the House of Lords and this scrutiny, I assume it will eventually pass the Safety of Rwanda bill. There may be amendments to it, but you think it will go through?
Well, I was hopeful that the Lords would take a stand and not pass it because the bill as a whole is entirely inappropriate. That clearly is not going to happen. It passed the second reading, so it's going to get through one way or another. There is some talk about some very sensible amendments, and I was actually involved in drafting certain amendments to it that would, instead of making the courts just pretend that Rwanda is safe, it would allow the courts to examine the facts and look at those quite carefully and do their job, make decisions about fact and law. Without resorting to politics and without fear or favour of different political sides. I'm hopeful that some of those amendments will be made. I'm also hopeful that it will be amended to bring it back in line with international law, so to allow the UK to comply with decisions of the European Court of Human Rights and make sure we don't put ourselves in the Russia camp rather than the civilized world camp.
Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Great to speak to you. Sam Fowles there, human rights barrister. It's really I mean, it's just this enormous game of ping pong, isn't it? It's now going through the House of Lords, and obviously the Council of Europe has its findings. It goes to the ECHR, and it's quite interesting in terms of political capital, because again, doesn't it set up the British government against the ECHR, which was what many people said we should have left in the first place?
Well, it does, and I think that will come back, and it will be an issue that we will be continually having conversations about, and will eventually need to leave if we want control of our borders. I do find it interesting, though, because the UN sends its girls to Rwanda to look after them from Afghanistan, because they're safer in Rwanda than they are in Afghanistan. I also find it quite interesting that Sam is very, very exercised about convincing people to believe something that's not true, but he fights for the Scottish Government to make us believe that men are women.
Well said, Dr. Renee. I can see that's pushed your buttons.
Yes,
yeah,
it has.
I can
Really
I can absolutely tell.
They are not, by the way.
No, we know that. We know that. But obviously, we now can't differentiate between men and women, because not even when you're running, according to Parkrun.